Hello lovely people, I'm Catherine and welcome to this week's coverlet of comfort. This week I'm going to be working on Fredfred the Tiger. Before I get into that, I just want to tell you about an in-person workshop that I'm teaching here in the West Country, so it's only really if you're in this part of the world. I've got the flyer open on my tablet. Now I'm not the organiser, I'm just the tutor, but I'll tell you all the contact details. I hope you can see that. I shall also put all the details in the description box below this video and future videos until it's all booked up. I'm going to be teaching the orange peel patchwork on Thursday the 25th of September from 9 AM till 12:30 PM, and that's at Woodlands Village Hall, Verwood Road, BH21 8LJ. I believe that's somewhere near Wimborne in Dorset. And it says, I'm your tutor, find out more about me while you're here already. It's YouTube K3N Cloth Tales. Needles, threads, fabric scrap, scissors and a ruler is all you'll need. The cost is £20 for the morning, and that will include tea, coffee, light refreshments. And the lady who's organising it is called Julia, and I'll put her email address and her WhatsApp number in the description box below the video. Places are limited, so if you'd like to come, I would advise you to book sooner rather than later. I'll also be publicising it on my social media, on my Instagram and on my Facebook page. So that's about that. Publicity over. Fun. Looking forward to it. I love doing these YouTube videos with you all, but I am looking forward to teaching in person again, I have to say. Right, so Fredfred the Tiger. I've decided, although he's tabby and white in real life, to do him gold, sort of wild gold, orangey colours. I did Stella Bear in green, so I feel that I can go crazy with the colours. What I do is, if I don't have an idea of colours, because I've got this big tangly thread nest of orts, whatever you want to call them, I just kind of go in and pull out something that calls to me. And today when I went pulling out stuff, orange started coming out. So, I pulled out one bit of orange, so then I started looking for other shades. It's just a tip, if you're not sure, just, just putting it out there. So here's my drawing of Fredfred the Tiger. I want to stitch his stripes, and I'm going to use, it's either called stacked running stitch or pattern darning. Now it's basically just running stitch. It's as simple as the running stitch that we did last week on Stella Bear. It's just where you place it, So don't be scared because it's got fancy names. Don't ever be scared of things with fancy names, would be my advice. I've got a bit of red because I might do his lips in the same way that I did Stella's lips, and I've got a bit of dark brown in case I want to do some outlining. So I've got all these different shades of sort of burnt oranges, and I think, even though I'm pretty sure I've got enough of each one, I am going to do some combining of colours just to get that blendy look, just because I like it, I've talked about doing it before if you've only got leftovers. In case you run out, so to combine two similar colours. Those are a bit too contrasty. In fact, that's a bit dark. That's more goldy orange, quite like that. Maybe that and the real orange. So I'm just going to play about with the colours. I'll take one strand of each. I'm going to stitch with 2 strands in total. I have got the window open because it's still warm here and everybody's outside, so they might be chatting and dogs barking, things like that. That's not Angel. You start to recognise voices of dogs, don't you? I mean, usually we recognise our own dogs, but I don't know what dog that was, but it wasn't Angel, because I know Angel's voice. Angel belongs to my neighbours that just live over the way there. Come on, threads, behave yourselves. And this morning I took Stella Bear to be clipped, so she's a very bold bear this morning. Well, she's not bold, she's still got hair. The lady who clips her does a lovely job, and Stella is always happy to go in there. Lovely lady. She did say today, though, I'm just filling time chatting while I'm threading my needle. She did say that Stella was very grubby, and I apologised, and she said, no, she said, I like it. She said, it really gives you a sense of satisfaction to clean her off. I said, well, next time I bring her, I'll roll her in a muddy puddle on purpose. Okay, so I'm putting these 2 threads in my needle. Now before I start stitching, I am going to draw some guidelines. I guess I could do the stitch guidelines like I showed you last time, but because I'm doing quite dense stitching, it's going to cover it up. So I think I'm just going to use a pencil. So I've got just a normal pencil here. It's a 4B, it's a very soft one. And I'm going to just use this for guidance. I don't need to do them exactly. So I'm just going to, and I'm not going to draw the shape, I'm just going to literally just put a line, just softly. So chances are you won't be able to see the actual line, but I don't think that really matters. So I'm just looking at my drawing and just putting them where I think, but not worrying too much. And they're kind of coming, they're not going right across. So they're coming from her back here, his back, sorry, this is Fredfred, and down, and then from down below they're coming up. There's one there, kind of right in the middle of his body. Doesn't really matter, you know. I mean, you, if you haven't done a tiger, will have different ideas. But you could do pattern darning, I'll explain more as I'm stitching, as a kind of, it doesn't have to be for stripes, it could just be for interest. You see quite a lot of elephants, obviously Indian elephants, in traditional Kantha, and they're often filled in with pattern darning. There's a stripe that kind of comes up here, which at the same time almost delineates those 2 back legs, so I'm going to definitely put that one in. And one there. It's quite a lot of stripes. And some little ones coming off the legs. I might worry about the legs later. Might just get these done first. I've put one in that wasn't on the drawing, but that doesn't matter. And there's one from his belly. Kind of comes up there. So there's one coming from his back and one from his belly, and they don't meet, but it looks like they could. I quite like that. I might as well do the legs, even though I just said I wasn't going to, while I'm here with the pencil. And there's a couple on that leg, and a couple on that leg. There we go. That'll do, pig. That'll do for now. We'll see where we get to. Don't hide the scissors. These are the snippies. I take the charm off so it doesn't bang on the desk. I know those of you who have been here for a long time know the history of the snippy snippies and the blunty blunties. These were my old scissors, which I was complaining about regularly in videos because they're blunt. And then lovely Sue bought me to an exhibition, was it last year? These snippy snippies. So, and they normally have a charm on so I can tell them apart, because I do not want to cut paper or polyester with the snippy snippies because it will blunt them. But the charm clangs if I put it down on the desk, so anyway, if you wanted to know. Okay, get stitching, Catherine. The people are here to watch you stitch, not listen to your witter. I don't think that's true. So pattern darning, you don't stitch, for example with these stripes, I wouldn't stitch all of this one stripe in one go and then go on to the next one. If I did that, I would be doing satin stitch. I want to stitch all the way along with every line of stitching, but only put a stitch where the stripe is. Now, because I'm not worried about a messy back, I don't mind if I jump that much, which is a good sort of 3/4 of an inch. If you do mind, you'll have to do a section, like if there's a big jump, work on a section where your lines are closer together completely, and then come back with a new thread and work, you know, the other lines. But I'm just going to start somewhere here around his bottom, the base of his tail, and work my way along and see where I get to. I can always go back and fill in afterwards. So I'm just going to come through from the back at the beginning of this first little stripe here, which is coming up just from under the base of his tail. And I do want them to kind of taper a bit at the ends rather than be a rectangular line, a strip, if you know what I mean. So I am going to have to pay a little bit of attention to the length of my stitching. So if I'm towards the tip of a line, I want the stitches to be smaller, and then if I'm towards the base of a line, I want them to be wider. That's a lot of information. It's one of those things that I think it takes a lot of words to explain something that's actually not that complex. So here I'm at the tip of a line, and I might even, for the very tip, do a stitch that goes in the direction of the line, like that. And then I'm going to jump right up here to the base of this line where it joins to his back, like that. And I might use a lot of thread doing this because of all the jumping, but I'd rather do that for the you know, for the process. So I want to straddle this line. Straddle's a good word, isn't it? I want to straddle this line with quite a big stitch because I need to leave myself leeway to taper the stitches as I go down. So I'm going to do a stitch that's maybe not quite a 1/4 inch long, but quite a big stitch. Maybe I'm going to do a full 1/4 inch, why not? Let's be bold. And then I'm going to come through on the back to my next line in the natural progression. And there again, that's joining the base of his back, so I'm going to come 1/8 inch one side of it, and then make my stitch 1/8 inch the other side, so it's a 1/4 inch total. You don't have, you know, don't get your rulers out. This is just guidance. And then I've got another. This line comes in the middle of his body, so I'm going to come to the very tip of it again. And just do a straight stitch in the direction of the line just to make that tip. And then here I'm going to do another tip because it's the end of a line. And possibly at this stage you might wonder what on earth I'm doing, but hopefully it will become more obvious as I go on. Now here I need a big jump to get to the end of the line. There's no reason why I can't come halfway the line if I want to and then go back later and finish. So if I'm going to come halfway along this line, I want my stitch to be kind of medium length. I think when you get into this, it can be a very absorbing process because you have to think about things, and I don't think thinking about things is necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes we stitch and we're thinking about other things, you know, other than what we're stitching, because we're doing something fairly simple and repetitive. Other times we're absorbed in the process and we have to think about what we're stitching. So here I've got the tip of a line, so I'm going to do a straight stitch again along the line. I'm going to come up there to that one, and that's the end of the line, and do a straight stitch. And I'm going to come up here. In fact, I'm going to make a third line, I think, there, just because I like threes of things. Get my pencil back again. He's got 2 lines there on the side of his cheek, here, 1, 2. I'm going to do a third one, I think. Maybe just lower and a bit shorter. I don't know why, I just felt like it. So again, I need to do the tip of that line. So a straight stitch, I've done that drawn line a bit big. And the tip of this line, and I haven't done anything down below on his legs because they didn't kind of fall into my path, so I'm going to leave those for later. And then the tip of this line. And this is my last line on this run, so I'm going to come through to the back and turn it. And what you can see now is I've got these funny little random stitches all over the place going in all directions that looks not really like anything at all. I'm going to turn, and now I'm going to come back up, and I need to do a stitch, the tiniest stitch I can, because I need to start giving this line here a bit of width to it. So I'm going to do my stitch across the line, just ever so slightly wider than that vertical stitch, and the same here. So you see, so I've got this little T shape, and the same there. And a little bit challenged by this linen because it's quite thick, slubby threads. So, you know, you kind of are forced to go in the little holes between the threads, but it doesn't matter. And another one there. And then I'm going to, actually I'm not going to do that one now, I'm going to carry on in a straight line to this one. And I'm going to do a stitch that's about the same width. Now here I want to get them as close together as I can. And if this really makes you go, oh my goodness, this is very complicated, Catherine, you can just satin stitch each line if that's easier for you. But I just thought this would be a more interesting way of doing it, basically. And I like to stitch in a line. I don't mind doing satin stitch in small areas, but the other thing is I am untwisting my thread every now and then because they lie much nicer together if they're not all twisted. So here's a vertical stitch, I need to just go slightly wider. Okay, I'm going to jump up here to this little tip. Because then that will do a small stitch, and that will get me back up here to the base of this one where I need to do a bigger stitch. I'm also being careful not to pull it super tight, especially those big jumps. So I've got one long stitch here, I'm going to do another stitch the same length really. Don't need to start tapering yet because I've got quite a, well actually that's quite a short line. If your line was long you'd stay wider for longer because you've got more length to allow you to taper. If your line is short you need to just pay attention so that you taper soon enough, if that makes sense. And there's another one that's going like that, and then I'm back to this little tip here. And if you miss spaces or your stitches are too wide apart, don't worry, next time you go past you can just fill them in. So I'm going to take a tiny stitch at the base of that one and turn again. And then I'm going to take another, come up right next to it. I'm going to start slightly further out because it's a very short line, so I need to start making my stitches a little bit longer. And come back up here. And these two are just parallel stitches to the previous ones, maybe making them slightly shorter already. Picked up a bit of something that I didn't want. Never mind, we'll get it later. Oh, I've got it. And that one, and coming down here. And these lines that are in the middle of his body, I'll need to make them wider going out, and then when I get somewhere near the middle of the line I need to make them, actually I'm going to draw these lines a bit darker so that you can really see them. That's maybe more helpful. I do find that pencil, just normal pencil, rubs off as you handle it, and I usually find it lasts just long enough for me to see it, but of course if you've got fancy marking tools, you know, the blue pens or whatever, and you want to use those, then you go for it. So as you get more stitching in, it will become more obvious what you're doing, if it's not already. But don't stress about it. You're just making little marks on the cloth to represent whatever it is you want to represent. It might be stripes on an animal like I'm doing, or it might be just filling in areas with a more interesting stitch. So I did a tiny stitch at the tip of that, which I shouldn't have done, but I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to work in the other direction. So, you know, I'm doing all the tapering and everything because there's stripes on a Fredfred Tiger. If you just want to do lines, you could actually just do them, you know, all your stitches roughly the same length, just the stripes, you know, if you just wanted to do stripes. So I hope you get the idea, and I don't need to keep saying the same thing all over again, because I think that might get a bit boring. Some of you might think it's boring whenever I talk about other stuff as well. But that is pretty much what I'm going to do, and as you can see it's going to take quite some time. So I think what might be helpful will be if I go and do some more and then come back when I've got more stitching done, and then I'll do more stitching with you, you know, the finishing off stitching. I think that will be more helpful than you just seeing an hour or whatever of this and not much changing. So it's nearly lunchtime here anyway. I should go and have my lunch and come back after lunch and I've done a bit more stitching and show you the next stage. Okay, many hours later. It is very time consuming, but I hope you'll agree that the effect is beautiful. The other advantage of using all different shades, because of the way you stitch, you don't stitch one stripe and then move on to the next. The colours really get mixed up, you know, across the whole thing, because you're stitching, you know, like I showed you, no time at all for you, along every stripe and turning and coming back. Here and there I found that I couldn't incorporate a stripe into the route I was taking, so I did have to satin stitch, and you can see a difference in person. I don't know if it will show up on the video, I'll do my best. This little bar here I satin stitched, and it stands much more proud of the cloth than the darning, the pattern darning, which, because you make the stitch and carry the thread onwards, lays much flatter to the cloth. Whereas with satin stitch, I will show you a little bit, because I probably will have to do it down here, in case you don't know how to do satin stitch. Because you take a wrapping movement with the needle, the stitched area stands much more proud. So there is a visible difference. It will depend on, for me, it would depend on which I enjoyed doing the most, as a primary, you know, thing to drive my decision, followed by the finished look. But you know, that may vary, that varies from person to person. So I've just, oh, and the other thing is I did add a couple more stripes. There was quite a big area here that I had to keep jumping across. If I show you on the back, you see the back is quite messy and quite a lot of thread. That's just the nature of the beast. But because I was jumping across some quite large areas, I thought it best to just put another stripe in and actually, you know, use that thread to make some stitches. So here was quite a big area. I added that one, I think. I might have added that one, I'm not exactly sure now. Anyway, I added a few. I did add a couple more stripes and extend a couple. So I just wanted to point that out. So I've just got this little bit around here to finish, and these two little stripes here. So I'll show you satin stitch. So you come up, let's do this one first, this tiny little one here. So you come up at the far end of wherever you want your stitched area to be, and then you come across and you go in the other end, and then you come back out next to where your thread's coming out, as close as you can. Jude Hill actually calls this the wrap stitch, but its proper name in inverted commas is satin stitch. I think wrap stitch describes it very well, because you're actually wrapping a little section of the cloth, and you almost, I mean, you try not to pull it tight, but you almost create a little roll in the cloth. And it is worth paying attention to these things when you're stitching, you know, what action is your stitch having on the cloth, which will of course affect the finished look. So because I want my point to taper, I'm just going to make my stitches slightly shorter each time as I come in. And just do that tiny little stripe. And then when I get down to the tiniest possible stitch that I can take, I can't take them any tinier, now I can finish off with a stitch going perpendicular, just to make the point pointy. I mean, that's personal preference. If you don't mind a blunt point, then don't do the extra little stitch at the end, but I like to just do a little point. And if you find that it does look a bit too T-shaped because your final tiny stitch wasn't that tiny, I mean, that doesn't look too bad, but you can always just come in again and just put a couple of extra tiny stitches if you want to, just to make the point pointy. So I'll come up here and just jump across and do the same, exactly the same thing to this other little bar here. Okay, I finished my satin stitch, but then I noticed there was a bigger gap than I would like, so I'm just going back and filling that in. It's fine to do that as well. And now that's okay, and really smoosh it down with my thumb. I personally, I much prefer the look of the pattern darning, and I much prefer the process, the rhythm of stitching in and out in a line. And I really got absorbed by paying attention to, you know, what route I might take to have the least jumps possible between the areas. But again, like I say often, that's personal preference. But I would encourage you to give it a go. I'm just trying to see if this stripe's supposed to carry on down to this leg. I think it was one of the extra ones I added, so I'm going to come up here and stitch this one. It doesn't really matter as long as I like the look of it. And see, now from where I am here, let me just darken these lines again so you can really see them. And then those two need to be joined back right down to his body there. So from here I can just have a look and see what's the most logical direction to take. It's like you're at a fork in the road and you need to decide which way to go. Now often with stitching you don't want to stitch yourself up blind alleys, but because we're doing the pattern darning we're going to turn around and come back, so there are no blind alleys as long as we've got space for stitches to come back, if that makes sense. So I'm going to go up to the point of this little line and take my very tiny end stitch, and then I'm going to come across up to here. And I think I said it earlier, it was some hours ago for me, you do have to pay attention to the tension. Pay attention to the tension. Just make sure you keep pulling your work flat every now and then. And so now that's my last stitch in that direction. Oops. There's a slub in the linen, and turn and come back again. So now I've got quite a clear route to take. I need to do a few more stitches there just to join that one on, but other than that I've just got this little path up and down to do. So I'll go ahead and finish that, and then I'll be back with you for finishing touches. Okay, so that's all my pattern darning done. And I'm very happy with the way it looks. It is, if you need to fill in a little bit here and there with the satin stitch, it's not very noticeable, but this is really standing out to me, probably because I know it's there. And I'm sure once it's got, you know, whatever else it's got going on around it, it'll be fine. But just be aware that the satin stitch, it just goes to show, although the end result is the same in terms of, you know, you've got little stitches lined up, stacked on each other on the surface of the cloth, you see the way they were made in the fact that the satin stitch stands really proud and the Kantha pattern darning is almost dished into the cloth. It's really level, you can feel it even. If I close my eyes and run my fingers over there, it's nearly smooth. Whereas if I close my eyes and run my finger over that satin stitch, there's a distinct bump. It's really pronounced. So anyway, I think I've said that enough. I'm going to just do exactly the same thing to his ear as I did to Stella Bear's ear, and just do that tiny little split back stitch outline. I'm still not completely sure what to do about his mouth, and I don't know whether I need to give him a nose. So while I think about that, I'm going to just do some split back stitch around his ear. So just like we've done so far, you know, last week and the week before. And next week I'm going to, they're racing up and down because it is getting on for their tea time. Next week I'm going to talk about the final stitching on this month's block, whatever that may be, because I'm not completely sure yet what I want to put around the edge. If I want to do a fancy border, or I don't know. So I have to give that some thought. What I do is I have them hanging here over the back of the chair, and so I can, when I'm sitting in the evening, I can see them, and then I can kind of percolate on them. So I would recommend that, have your work up somewhere where you can see it when it's in progress, because sometimes ideas come to you. I mean, look, those few little stitches there just for his ear, I think they've made a huge difference. I don't know what I think about doing his nose. I feel I need to do something, because it looks a bit... let's do the mouth first. It's possible that if I really can't decide, I will leave it again, and probably decide at some point in the week. It's such a little thing, but on something figurative, I talked about the eyes in week 1 of this month. It's really noticeable, so it is worth taking a little bit of thought over. For me, you know, that's me. I just feel that these two little furry people of mine are very precious to me, and I want to do them justice. So I left that dark brown in that needle, because if I do the nose, then I will use the dark brown probably. So I've got a little scrap of 2 strands of red. Now Stella's mouth I filled in because I'd drawn it inside the line. You see the difference? I'd done it like that. Whereas Fredfred's on the cloth, I didn't. I left his mouth open. So I think I will maybe just run some red. I don't know whether to do it inside or outside. I might do it inside. How about a couple of chain stitches? I hear you all say, yes, Catherine, you go for it. Because they're kind of lip-shaped, or they can be. So I'm going to come up on the point there of his open mouth. And then I'm going to do 1 chain stitch going that way. So for a chain stitch, I've got my loop laid on the cloth and in the direction I'm going. I go in with my needle into the exact same hole I came out of. I come up however long I want my chain stitch to be. And then trapping the loop under the needle, I pull it through. And then I'm going to just anchor that down and have a look. If I should have come all the way out to the nose, I'm not sure. We're still wondering about that nose. Now I think I'm going to do another chain stitch going down the other way. I will get my thumb out of your way in a minute. So I'm coming back into that same hole again. And exactly the same thing for his bottom lip. So into that same hole. Come down there. Oh yes, I like that. It's suitably kind of cheeky looking. That little monkey over Fredfred. Oh yes, I really like that. So I'll finish that bit of red off. And where's my snippies? There they are. And now okay, that bit of red, you see that? I can get 2 more chain stitches out of that, so if I need to stitch another chain stitch lip at one point, the thread's there waiting for me. So I go back to my dark brown, and then I think because the lip has stopped there, that's kind of left an obvious place for me to put a nose. So I'm going to just come through with my, I'm going to put a knot in my thread. It's late in the day. I was up relatively early to get Stella to the groomers because the lady, Terry she's called, that clips her, had a cancellation. But it was very first thing this morning, and where I go I have to go through the outskirts of a town and, you know, rush hour traffic. Anyway, I was up and out early, having walked Stella first, of course. And yeah, I haven't had my afternoon nap because I've been stitching. Anyway, stop moaning, Catherine, and get on with it. So I'm going to come up and then I'm going to lay my thread on and have a little audition as to how I think I might want to do the nose. So I can just use my thread and just think, if I did it, I might just make that kind of shape and then fill it in with satin stitch. So you can do that, you know, you just come through with whatever colour you think you're going to use, and you could then say, well, do I want a great big nose like that? So I'm over exaggerating. Or do I just want to, you know, make that a little bit darker, barely define it? No, I think I'm going to go somewhere in the middle. So I'm just going to do a shape like that with a stitch, just to outline the area. In fact, to get the curve in the stitch, I could even do a little couch stitch. So I'll go to the far end of where I want my line to be, and I'll pull my thread through, and I won't tighten it up, and I'll push it into place with my thumb, and then come back with my needle under that thread, inside the curve, and then just take a tiny little stitch over the thread just to anchor it down so that it stays slightly curved. Do you see? Do you see? And now I can fill in. I'll come back to the top of my shape and I'm just going to cram a few stitches in there, any old how, just to colour it in basically. Basically it's satin stitch. Well, it is satin stitch. Two stitches might be enough. I'm going to pull through to the back and just have a look. Yep, I think that's enough. Yep, I like it. I like it a lot. So, do you see how I didn't know what to do here, so I did the ear roll because I was sure about that because it worked so well on Stella. And then I had the idea of the chain stitch mouth. I still wasn't sure about the nose, and then having done the mouth, the solution for the nose kind of presented itself. So I hope that's useful. If ever you're looking at things and you think you have to plan the whole thing in advance, you absolutely don't. In fact, it's kind of the ethos of Slowstitch that you do something and then you respond to what's there. So there we go. So that is Fredfred the Tiger, and of course I later thought while I was stitching, of course I picked orange. He's a tiger. Sorry for my neighbour shouting. Stella's going to go and bark at him now. Sorry about that. So there's a Fredfred Tiger and there's a Stella Bear from last week. So that was two different ways. I deliberately started with the one that I thought, you know, if you're new here, or not if you're new, but if you're less confident, you would be happier with that because that's only running stitch. Sorry about that, they're really having a conversation out there. But I always wanted to do this with you because this is very Indian inspired. And sorry, very distracted. But I thought if I did this first I might frighten you all. Oh, just a second, there's someone at the door. Sorry about that. What was I saying? Yeah. So the running stitch. So this straightforward. I didn't hear anyone here in the comments or anyone in the Facebook group said that they had issues with it. I do know though that last year, many of you had issues with this. When we looked at the pattern darning, we did the stack running stitch in the wheel shape. And I do know that recently in the Facebook group, lovely Suzanne, who does wonderful work, has recently posted a paisley shape that she's stitched with this stitch. Sorry, I'm going to close the window. Lovely Suzanne has shared and a lot of people in the comments, she did a paisley shape with pattern darning, really beautiful. A lot of people in the comments said, oh, I looked at that stitch in the Kantha book by Hector Cole that I've referred to before, and I thought, oh no, it's too hard. I already knew I was going to be doing it this week, so I kind of bit my tongue, or didn't put much in the way of response there, but I just want to reassure you it's running stitch, it's all it is. It's just where you place the stitches and the length of them, and obviously there's that complexity to it. but please don't be afraid of it. Don't do it if you think it's going to make you uncomfortable, because our theme is comfort, but I do really encourage you to give it a go, because I'm sure you can. I'm sure you can do it. And the effect, I think, is so beautiful. So anyway, that's all that wittering. Next week we've got something going on around here of some kind, and then that'll be the last week of May, and then we can move on to June, which is my birthday month, the big 6-0 looming. So I'll leave you with Fredfred. I'll give him I'll do a little handheld scan, and then maybe you can see in close up what I'm talking about, the difference. So it just leaves me to say thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to you joining me next time for more cloth tales. Bye bye. Bye bye.